Hello, this is Minter Chen. In this lecture, we're going to continue discuss motivation as one of the key elements for managing people. And I'm a professor of management information system at Smith School of Business and Economics at California State University, Channel Island. And one of the process-based theories is expectancy theory, which is really based on psychology's study. And in this case, expectancy theory stated that the organization need to relate reward directly to performance, and to ensure that the reward provided are those reward deserved and wanted by the recipient of the people who perform the task. And so we can look at it from a process viewpoint, which first is the effort. And we need to ask the questions, what will my efforts lead to high performance, which means an individual employee will ask this question. If I put in this effort, will that lead to better performance? And sometimes effort may not be equivalent to performance. And so I want to make sure that the right effort will contribute to the high performance. And this is called expectancy. And next question is that, will the performance that, if we get that good performance, would that performance leads to outcome? Outcome here actually means the reward. And this is referred to as instrumentality, which means with the right performance leads to the kind of reward that. So that's the second question. The third question is that, do I find the outcome desirable? Do I find the reward is something that I really want? Okay, because sometimes we have a good performance and they basically just give you a piece of paper, appreciate your performance, but we're expecting maybe monetary reward or something else. So that is called valence, which means, is the reward attractive enough to the employee? And these three things are kind of step by step. Basically, does my effort leads to good performance? Does good performance leads to the kind of reward that I wanted? And that's called expectancy theory. And so it's important when we talk about reward, sometimes we do have to mention punishment, which is the other side of the coin. And the positive enforcement is the reward, and the negative enforcement is the punishment. And as a manager, we kind of have to use both of them, and we'll discuss this further later on. This is a very typical, we call it carrot and stick approach, which you probably heard about it. And it's referred to a policy that offers a combination of reward and punishment to induce proper behavior that, as a manager, that we wanted. And however, when we look at rewards in general, and we find out it's all relative. Employees don't look only at absolute reward, they look at relative reward. Relative means that comparing sometimes with other people's in terms of their performance as the reward they're getting. So people seems to have a greater tolerance of overpayment equality. Equality means that somehow some people are paying more than us if I believe that we all contribute the same. We're kind of more tolerant to that kind of overpayment equalities. And however, if we're kind of underpaid, then we kind of get really frustrated and complain about it. So this leads us to the so-called equity formula theory, which is one of the process-based theory. Basically, we're measuring the equity formula as an outcome, which is kind of the rewards divided by inputs, which may be our efforts. And put in certain amount of effort, we're getting certain amount of reward. And we're going to compare that with other people. We call it reference, people we referenced. If the reward we're getting for per units of outcome, which is the equity, is greater than the reference per unit of inputs outcome, then we probably got treated more favorably. And if it's equal, then there's no complaint. We felt that everybody treated equally. However, if somebody got paid more for the same amount of input, in this case, then we certainly will feel frustrated and because being treated unfairly for whatever reason. And that's where things get complicated. So this is what most of the people will react to inequality, particularly being treated unfairly. And they may have distorted perceptions. And sometimes we may ask other people who got treated better, say, hey, why don't you do more? But do you have the authority to tell the reference to do more because they get paid more? And sometimes we basically just say, okay, if you don't pay me more, I'm going to put less effort, and certainly you're expecting to get paid the same. The other is that maybe we're not working hard enough, so we increase our own input and expecting more outcome, or try to ask for a raise. That's another way to do it. Or maybe we compare to the wrong person. I mean, the wrong individual reference, because maybe we don't have the same kind of the job. Sometimes we may try to find the proper reference for our comparison. And if somehow asking for a raise, putting more effort, not fixing the situation, we may decide to leave the situation, which means quit your job. That's always an alternative. The last, not the least, is sometimes you may seek legal action because you may be treated unfairly, which may be some kind of discrimination. And so that certainly is another option. And also, other than the outcome equity, related equity, fairness is also important. And there are kind of three aspects of fairness beyond equity. One is, we call it distributive justice, which means that the output or outcome received from the organizations are fair, which means the reward has been distributed fairly. The second is procedure justice, which means the decision-making process or procedure is considered fair, which means the way the manager decided how to reward people based on their input has been made it public. People are aware of the process. The process has been considered fair. The last one is called interactional justice, which is the degree which people are treated with respect, kindness, and dignity. When, say, the manager interact with the employee or subordinate to discuss the kind of the reward they're supposed to be getting. And that process has been handled in a very respectful manner. Next, we're going to talk about reinforcement theory. And according to reinforcement theory, that behavior is a function of its consequence, which means that people learn from the consequence of their behavior. Therefore, they will behave based on the consequence that they learned over time, and there will be associated. Eventually, they find a correlation between their behavior and the consequence, either positive consequence or negative consequence eventually would affect people's behaviors. And this, one of the most well-known study is by Ivan Pavlov. It's called behavioral conditioning. Another it's by Skinner's called operant conditioning. We're going to focus on Pavlov's behavioral conditioning. It is highly recommended you click on this link, watch this video. You get a better understanding of Pavlov's research and regarding conditioning. This is referred to as classical conditioning. I hope you find it useful. And reinforcement can be carried out in kind of 4 different ways. Let's kind of quickly go over it. One is positive enforcement, which means the positive behavior followed by positive consequence. For instance, if manager praise the employee, the praising the employee is positive consequence. You praise the employee because of some positive behavior. Okay, and certainly give them a raise or some bonus will be considered for their good performance is considered positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is if the positive behavior followed by removal of negative consequence. Okay. In this case, it's still it's not as good as like positive consequence or of rewarding people, but remove maybe the penalty. Okay. And for positive behavior, that's called negative reinforcement. And the name is not as clear, but this is what it's referred to. A third is punishment. If there's a negative consequence, you're not meeting the sales target, there will be negative consequence, which means not meeting the sales target is a negative behavior. And there will be negative consequence, which means that there may be a pay cut or no reward in a sense, and no special treatment that would be considered punishment. So manager demotes the employee because of negative behavior is considered punishment. And extinctions is negative behavior followed by removal of positive consequence, which means manager maybe just simply ignore the behaviors, not certainly praise the employee. So I would say the positive reinforcement or the punishment are still the two that's most obvious and frequently used. And there's an issue that we need to consider is that how we introduce the reward for or punishment for the behavior, how frequently and how much, and those are the things that we need to consider in terms of how frequently. And there are 4 categories. One is fixed interval, which means that for certain number of time a behavior occur, like if you have done 3 good things, then we will reward you for every 3 extra contribution to the organization. A continuous schedule, which means that for every achievement of certain behavior, occurrence of certain behavior, we will reward right away. This kind of instant reinforcement. good or bad. And the third is a fixed ratio schedules, which means that we would say calculate the bonus on a monthly basis. That will be considered fixed ratio schedules. Variable ratio is kind of random. Some managers, just because they're happy on a certain day, they decided to reward people who has good behavior. Another issue which is not directly related to motivation, however, it's kind of relevant in some way. As we mentioned in the classic management principle, job specialization has been around for a long time. However, very specialized job can become really boring. If you remember one of the silent movie clip I asked you to watch, and the character worked in the factory in a very specialized job, eventually went crazy, and so definitely he was not motivated at all. And so how can we actually motivate people to deal with the trend of job specialization, which means we need to reverse the trend of job specialization and through job design. One is what we call job rotation, which means we'll rotate employee from job to job at regular interval or some schedule, and which can relieve them from boring typical job, repeated jobs. And this is often used for manager trainee, who if you want to train somebody who has the potential to be the managers, and we may, when they come to the company, we may actually move them from one job to the other every 2 months or something for a year, and eventually decided which type job business function may be best for them. Also, they have a little bit of global view of what's going on in the company. So there's some benefit of job rotation, but I don't think job rotation really referred to keep moving people around on a regular basis for a long period of time. Job enlargement, which means expand the task performed by the employee to add more variety so they don't feel boring, because there's a different variety of things. It's much easier for them to kind of perform this kind of enlarged kind of task. Job enrichment, which give worker more control over how they perform their own task, and which means that instead of like an assembly line, they have to finish a piece of assembling a part in every 10 seconds. You will give them a longer period of time for them to finish assemble certain amount of parts, but they can do faster, slower, as long as they finish within that longer time frame. At least the worker will be given more control over how they perform their own task. So this slide summarizes some truths about motivation based on one literature's listed down here. And first of all, we need to recognize the importance of motivations, and in recognition itself is one way to motivate employee, and it costs very little. There's more to high employee performance than just motivation, and we have mentioned this because such as we just mentioned the job enrichment will be one way to motivate people without referring to any of the classic theory of motivation. And motivation is all relative. And make sure people are getting what they wanted in their reward. And also, there's a kind of generation gap for younger generation. The kind of what they expect to be rewarded may be different. Maybe they want a little bit more vacational time. They want to have more balanced job or work-family balance. That's what they expected more than monetary reward. And when you give feedbacks to employees, you can criticize the behavior, but not the people. And professional workers, usually they go for the flow. The flow is a technical term in psychology. When people really enjoy what they're doing, they're in the state of the so-called the flow. And for a lot of professional workers, they actually enjoy to be in that state of flow, which means they really enjoy the work they're doing. They're highly motivated in that case. And also setting goals is very important. That will be our next topic. However, not everybody may be invited or involved or really want to participate in goal setting. However, if we need to measure performance, we need to set some goals in advance. And also just tell employee to do their best is not likely to achieve, to help them to achieve their best. And we also found a lot of employees are not really motivated at their work or jobs today. And so this is actually a pressing issue, how we motivate employee. Just like in my classes, I sometimes struggle in terms of how I can motivate my student to learn more from various courses. And I don't think I'm alone in this regard as a faculty member. And we often think happy workers will be more productive, but here they say happy worker, unnecessary productive worker. So happiness is important. I'm not saying happiness is not important. And also, how do we come up with ways to motivate employee who has low skill and low pay job? And personally, I felt that helped them to have kind of a career path, so they can see that they can, down the road, they can be promoted with proper on-the-job training, and it will be a good way to motivate those employees. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.